March 24, 1970, Talladega Superspeedway. The Alabama sun shimmered across 2.66 miles of fresh asphalt. A blue Dodge roared down the straightaway, its massive wing cutting through the air like a jet. The speedometer needle pressed beyond the unthinkable, 200 miles per hour. For the first time in history, a stock car had shattered the barrier. Headlines screamed, legends were born. But hidden beneath the cheers, NASCAR was facing a crisis. Because what shocked people was not the speed, it was the politics. This wasn't just about a car. It was about money, control, and a machine so dominant that NASCAR had no choice but to ban it. This is the story of the 1969 Dodge Daytona, the winged warrior that was too fast for its own good. In 1968, Dodge had a brand new Charger. Sleek, muscular, a beauty for the showroom floor. Buyers loved it, but on the racetrack, it was a disaster. The recessed grille caught air like a parachute. The tunneled rear window created a swirling vortex of drag. At Daytona and Talladega, where races were won by aerodynamics, the Charger was hopeless. Ford's Torino sliced through the wind with ease, while Dodge's Charger lumbered like a brick through a storm. Week after week, Fords crossed the line in victory. Dodge, once a powerhouse in NASCAR, was humiliated. The response was quick. Dodge engineers scrambled. They modified the Charger with a flush-mounted grille. They flattened the rear window to kill the turbulence. The result was the Charger 500. It looked clean. It looked fast. But on track, it wasn't enough. The Torino was still winning. The Charger 500 had failed. By late 1968, Chrysler executives were desperate, and the final insult came when Richard Petty, the king himself, abandoned the Plymouth camp and jumped to Ford. His reasoning was simple. Chrysler couldn't give him a car that could win on superspeedways. For Dodge and Plymouth, this wasn't just a loss. It was humiliation on a national stage. Something drastic had to be done. So Chrysler went outside the box, way outside. Instead of turning to traditional car designers, they called in engineers. The same men who were building rockets for NASA's Apollo missions were now asked to save Chrysler's racing program. Their mission was clear: build the most aerodynamically advanced stock car in history. A car that would not just compete with Ford, but annihilate it. The result was something the world had never seen before. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. It was unlike anything on the road. Nearly a foot longer than a standard Charger, its body stretched to 18 feet, 10.5 inches. Its height was just 53 inches, low, sleek, and sinister. But the most outrageous features were unmistakable. An 18-inch nose cone that replaced the grille and a 23-inch tall rear wing that towered higher than most people's waist. To the casual eye, it looked insane. To engineers, it was genius. The Daytona weighed just over 4,000 pounds. Under the hood, customers could choose between the 440 Magnum V8 or the legendary 426 Hemi, though only 70 Hemis were built. In total, just 503 Daytonas were produced, barely meeting NASCAR's requirement for homologation. But the true story wasn't in the numbers. It was in the science. Wind tunnel testing proved what Chrysler's missile men suspected. The Daytona's design reduced aerodynamic drag by a staggering 40% compared to the standard Charger. At speed, the massive wing produced more than 600 pounds of downforce, pinning the rear tires to the ground. On paper, the Daytona was capable of speeds approaching 240 miles per hour. For NASCAR, this was an arms race, and Dodge had just launched a nuclear weapon. But what happened next would prove that dominance comes with a cost. September 14, 1969. Alabama International Motor Speedway, later known as Talladega. It was the track's grand opening, a massive 2.66-mile oval built to be the fastest in the world. And Dodge was ready to unleash the Daytona. But there was a problem, a deadly problem. The brand new asphalt surface was too abrasive. Tires shredded during practice. Drivers ran laps at unprecedented speeds, then watched their rubber explode. Beneath them, NASCAR President Bill France faced a nightmare. Drivers demanded the race be postponed. They said it was too dangerous, but France was unmoved. He got behind the wheel himself and drove 160 miles per hour around the speedway. Then he faced the drivers and said, "If you're scared, you don't have to race." Tensions boiled. Leroy Yarbrough, one of the season's top drivers, stormed out. The story goes he even punched France in the face. It was rebellion in broad daylight. The rebellion spread. Richard Petty, the sport's biggest star, led a walkout. One by one, 36 of NASCAR's best drivers packed up their haulers and left. It was the first and only driver strike in NASCAR history. Bill France refused to cancel. Instead, he filled the field with rookies, with Saturday's support drivers, with anyone willing to risk it. The grandstands stayed full. The race went on, and into this chaos rolled a Dodge Daytona. Behind the wheel was Richard Brickhouse. He wasn't a superstar. He wasn't even a regular contender. But that day, the car made him a winner. Brickhouse took the checkered flag in the very first Talladega race. It would be his only NASCAR victory. The real star was the machine itself. The winged Dodge had arrived. From that moment forward, the Daytona was untouchable. Its design was so superior that Ford and Mercury scrambled to respond. The Cyclone Spoiler 2 was rushed into competition, but nothing worked. On the biggest tracks, the Daytona was always the car to beat. And then came history, March 24th, 1970. Talladega Superspeedway. Buddy Baker slid into the cockpit of a blue number 88 Daytona prepared by Cotton Owens' team. This was no ordinary race. It was a test, an attempt to do what no man had done before. Break 200 miles per hour in a stock car. The morning was wet, the track slick. Baker waited. By early afternoon, the surface dried, and he rolled onto the oval. The first laps climbed higher and higher. The car stuck to the pavement like it was on rails. The stopwatch ticked. The crowd held its breath. Lap 30. 200 doll. 96 miles per hour. The barrier was broken. Lap 34. 200.447. A record. A legend. When Baker climbed out, his grin said it all. "It's the most wonderful feeling I've ever had. Being the first guy to run 200 miles an hour on a closed circuit. That's something nobody can ever take away." The headlines were explosive. NASCAR had reached speeds 30 miles per hour faster than the Indianapolis 500. The Dodge Daytona had made history, and it was only the beginning. By the end of 1970, the numbers were staggering. 6 victories, pole positions at every superspeedway, qualifying speeds 15, sometimes 20 miles an hour faster than the competition. For Ford and Mercury, it was hopeless. The Daytona was simply too advanced. But what shocked the public wasn't just the dominance, it was what came next. Because speed wasn't the real enemy. The real enemy was politics. Speed was not the real problem. The problem was power. And at the center of it all stood William H.G. France Sr., the founder of NASCAR. For 2 decades, he ruled with an iron fist. Drivers raced when he said, where he said, for the purse he offered. Nobody questioned him, but Talladega changed that. The boycott had cracked his authority. Leroy Yarbrough's punch was more than a fist. It was a symbol. For the first time, NASCAR's dictator looked vulnerable. France needed to regain control. And the perfect excuse was right in front of him. The aero cars. Publicly, he said they were too dangerous. Speeds over 200 miles an hour, he warned, were beyond what tire technology and safety equipment could handle. It sounded like a noble cause. It sounded like protection. But behind closed doors, the truth was darker. The Daytona wasn't banned for safety. It was banned because NASCAR was spinning out of France's hands. Factory teams with unlimited budgets were rewriting the sport. Independent owners, the backbone of NASCAR's early years, couldn't keep up. The little guy was being crushed. France needed to put a stop to it before the sport collapsed under the weight of Detroit's money, and Chrysler wasn't the only problem. Plymouth, Dodge's sister brand, was furious. They had built their own aero car for 1970, the Superbird. It was outrageous, with its towering wing and nose cone. On the track, it worked, but on the streets, it was a disaster. Dealers couldn't sell them. Buyers laughed at the wing. The cars sat rotting on showroom floors. Richard Petty returned to Plymouth to drive the Superbird, but he was miserable. The car was built for racing, he said. People weren't buying them. At Ford, the picture was even worse. Their aero program had drained millions, but results were scarce. Lee Iacocca, Ford's powerful vice president, began asking hard questions. Was NASCAR worth the money? The board wasn't so sure. Both manufacturers were tired. Both wanted out. But neither wanted to be the first to quit. That's when the secret meetings began. Behind closed doors, Bill France spoke with Chrysler. He spoke with Ford. The message was clear. Give me a reason to end this aero war, and I will. And the manufacturers agreed. The Daytona, the Superbird, the Torino Talladega, the Mercury Cyclone, all of them would be sacrificed. France would make it look like a safety decision, but everyone at the table knew the truth. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. December 1970. NASCAR announced new rules for the coming season. The language was technical, but the meaning was unmistakable. Any car with aerodynamic devices, wings, nose cones, radical spoilers, would be restricted to a 305 cubic inch engine. It was a death sentence disguised as regulation. While other cars could run engines up to 430 cubic inches, the Daytona and Superbird were shackled. A 305 barely produced 250 horsepower. Against competitors making well over 450, the aero cars never stood a chance. The message was clear. The winged warriors were finished. Only one man dared to try. Dick Brooks entered the 1971 Daytona 500 in a Dodge Daytona fitted with the tiny 305. For a few laps, he surprised the field. The car's aerodynamics carried him to the front. He even led the race. But horsepower always tells. The engine strained, the tires wore, and finally, he crashed. Brooks finished 7th. It was the last stand of the winged Dodge, the funeral of a legend. From that day forward, the aero cars were gone. NASCAR had erased them from competition, but the cover-up continued. For decades, the official line repeated the same story. The cars were too dangerous, too fast, too unstable. Museums repeated it, books printed it, documentaries narrated it. The myth was sealed, yet the men inside the sport knew better. Larry Rathgeb, Chrysler's racing boss, said it plainly. France made the rules because he was losing control. He couldn't cope with the factory representatives. Cotton. Owens, the man who built Buddy Baker's record-setting car, never forgave it. We had the fastest cars in NASCAR history, he said, and they banned them because we were too good. Buddy Baker, the first man to break 200 miles per hour, watched his greatest achievement fade into a footnote. They banned the cars that made NASCAR exciting, he said. It was politics, pure and simple. The truth was buried beneath the safety excuse. But in reality, NASCAR had killed the Daytona not because it was dangerous, but because it was perfect. The Dodge. Daytona wasn't just fast. It was a scientific breakthrough, an engineering masterpiece that redefined what a stock car could be. On paper, the numbers were staggering. 0 to 60 in just over 5 seconds. A quarter mile in 13 and a half. Official top speed, over 200 miles per hour. In wind tunnel tests, the Daytona pushed beyond 243. For a car built from showroom parts, the achievement was unheard of. Its aerodynamic efficiency cut drag by nearly 40% compared to a standard Charger. That single leap in design allowed higher speeds with less strain, more stability, and control in places where other cars shook themselves apart. The wing was the most controversial feature. 23 inches tall, it seemed ridiculous. Critics mocked it as overkill. But the science was irrefutable. At 200 miles per hour, the wing generated more than 600 pounds of downforce, enough to keep the rear wheels glued to the asphalt while competitors fought to stay planted. The nose cone was just as revolutionary. Extending 18 inches forward, it didn't just slice the air, it shifted the center of pressure, balancing the car at speeds that made ordinary stock cars twitch and wander. With the Daytona, high speed wasn't chaos, it was control. And yet, the production version looked almost identical to its racing twin. Just 503 cars rolled off the line. Homologation specials, built not for the streets, but for the rules. Some came with the mighty 426 Hemi, others with the 440 Magnum. Both were monsters in their own right. Today, they are holy grails. Machines worth $500,000 to $2 million. One car, however, is priceless. The very same blue number, 88, that Buddy Baker piloted past 200. Serial number DC-93. The car that proved the impossible was possible. To this day, it remains one of the most important artifacts in all of racing history. The Daytona wasn't just another muscle car. It was a glimpse of the future. A machine so advanced it forced NASCAR to change the rules. The irony is impossible to ignore. NASCAR banned the Daytona for being too advanced, too fast, too perfect. And yet, more than 50 years later, every car on the grid uses the very same principles. Aerodynamic noses, rear spoilers, wind tunnel testing. What was once outlawed is now standard. The Dodge Daytona wasn't too dangerous. It was too far ahead of its time. In 2024, Dodge resurrected the name, this time not with a fire-breathing V8, but with an electric muscle car. The wing was gone, but the attitude remained. A reminder that legends never truly die. But the truth can't be erased. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona was not banned because it posed a risk to safety. It was banned because it was unbeatable. In a sport built on competition, perfection was the greatest threat of all. For 15 short months, from September 1969 to December 1970, NASCAR witnessed something extraordinary. A car so dominant, so scientifically advanced, so utterly untouchable, that it changed the sport forever. Buddy Baker's 200-mile-per-hour run, Richard Brickhouse's unlikely Talladega victory, Cotton Owens' engineering genius, the towering wing and pointed nose that terrified competitors and embarrassed Detroit's rivals. The Daytona proved a simple truth. With enough brilliance, with enough audacity, you could build a machine that transcended its era. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing you can do. Because the Daytona wasn't just fast, it wasn't just powerful. It was perfect. And perfection, in NASCAR, could not be allowed to survive. The greatest irony, the car they said was too fast for safety set the foundation for every safety innovation NASCAR uses today. Sometimes, being ahead of your time isn't a blessing. It's a curse. The 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona, too fast for its own good, too perfect for the world around it, and forever, one of the greatest legends in American automotive history.